The film starts with little Walter Beckett, who's busy working on new gadgets he thinks will help with his mom's missions. As he's about to complete one of his inventions, his mom calls to him, distracting his attention. A bulb then shoots out of his gizmo and breaks his mother's coffee mug in half. She asks Walter what he's up to and he starts to explain what he sees as the safest means of tackling villains, without hurting anyone. But his mom starts running late and has to leave. Walter then asks if he could come with her since the kids at school laugh at him and call him weird. His mom comforts him, and they hug. She then reminds Walter that she'll always have his back. 14 years later, the scene opens with Lance Sterling, a cocky secret agent of Htuv, which stands for Honor, Trust, Unity, and Valor. He is sent to recover an attacked drone from Japanese arms dealer KIMURA in Japan. Before the buyer Killian, a cyborg terrorist arrives, Sterling breaks in against the orders of Htuv director Joy Jenkins. He hides in a fish tank awaiting Killian. Once Killian arrives, he blows up the fish tank to make an entrance. He takes down a few of KIMURA's men and catches up to KIMURA and Killian. KIMURA tries to attack him but Sterling knocks him out without a hassle. Killian then moves in for an attack and is able to scan Sterling's face. He grabs Sterling by the head, about to crush it when Sterling flips over an eel that short-circuits Killian's bionic arms for a brief moment, granting Sterling an escape. Just then, the power goes out, and a troop of KIMURA's men swarms the place. Killian escapes, while Sterling has to fight the gang. He takes out a gadget that's meant to be a grenade and throws it at the gang, but instead of exploding, it portrays it as a cloud of glitter with a kitten on display. Though not what he expected, he goes with it and takes down KIMURA's men. Finally, he manages to escape by blowing himself out of the building's roof. He flies through Killian's helicopter and grabs the briefcase containing the drone before finally escaping. Sterling returns to the Htuv headquarters and is welcomed with applause from the other agents. He takes the elevator and goes straight to the gadgets department to confront Walter Beckett, who has through the years become a socially inept MIT graduate and an outcast young scientist. Sterling yells at him for equipping non-lethal weapons into his suit. Walter then tries to convince Sterling that there is a more peaceful way to save the world. Sterling however doesn't care, and just wants Walter to stop messing with his stuff. Walter follows him into the elevator and tries to explain his latest invention, which he calls biodynamic concealment, but Sterling fires him before he can explain anything. On getting to Director Joy's office, they discover that Sterling had retrieved an empty briefcase. Just then, Sterling is confronted by Marcy Koppel, an internal affairs agent, who reveals footage of Sterling, but is actually Killian in a holographic disguise, leaving with the drone. Marcy labels him as a traitor and orders his arrest, but Sterling escapes the Htuv. Later that night, Sterling traces KIMURA's location to Mexico and decides to track down Walter to help him disappear. Meanwhile, Walter arrives home and places his things on the table. As he walks by we see a monument in honor of his mother, who had died in 2009. Walter takes a seat to catch up on his K-drama, and while he's watching, his experiment finishes, alerting his attention. He takes a feather from his pet pigeon and finally concludes the experiment. While he's celebrating, Sterling's sudden presence spooks him out. He requests for the biodynamic concealment Walter was talking about, but Walter insists on offering him a drink first. Out of impatience, Sterling grabs the beaker in Walter's hands and ingests the entire concoction, thinking it is a glass of water. Sterling then transforms into a pigeon by undergoing chromothripsis. As he begins to freak out, Walter tells him not to worry and that he has called the agency to inform them that Sterling is with him, and to come to witness his latest invention. But before Walter and Sterling can decide what to do next, Marcy and other Htuv agents chase the duo through the city. They escape in Sterling's car, which Sterling had put on auto drive. Amidst the chaos, Sterling suggests attacking the agents but Walter declines. During their argument, Walter accidentally powers down the auto drive, putting them in serious trouble. Fortunately, they crash off the side of a bridge and land safely on the back of a moving truck. The next morning the two of them are flying in Sterling's private jet on their way to confront KIMURA at a resort in Playa del Carmen, Mexico. When they arrive at the place, Sterling asks Walter to sit back and not get in his way. But he ends up making new pigeon friends. After failing to retrieve KIMURA's key card from the front desk, Sterling realizes how useful his pigeon friends might be. He finally makes it into KIMURA's room but fails to get information, and KIMURA finds out he's a pigeon. He tries to take KIMURA out the usual way, but his efforts prove useless when he remembers he has feathers. Luckily for Sterling, Walter steps in, and with the help of two of his gadgets, one to disable KIMURA and the other a truth serum, KIMURA spills out information on Killian's whereabouts in Venice, Italy before Marcy and the Htuv can capture them again. The agents chase the duo outside, while Walter summons the courage to jump after being hyped by Sterling. Walter jumps off the building, but he doesn't make it to the other side and falls with Sterling. They somehow wriggle their way out of it, and after managing to escape, Walter and Sterling find themselves at a dead end with the Htuv agents. Walter then tries to grab another one of his gizmos, but one of Sterling's pigeon friends swallows it. Fortunately for them, the gizmo activates while in the belly of the pigeon. Walter and Sterling then duck for cover while the gizmo takes out the agents. Meanwhile, Killian breaks into the Htuv covert weapons facility. He threatens one of the workers there and is able to obtain the agency database file before throwing the employee off the building and out into the open water. On the other hand, Sterling and Walter are on their way to Venice in Sterling's private boat. Walter tells Sterling that the antidote will be ready soon. A while later, the antidote is ready, and this time, Walter takes a feather from Sterling to complete the antidote. Unfortunately, the formula turns black after combusting. Sterling then gets annoyed when Walter tells him he doesn't know what happened and that he'll try to figure it out soon enough. The duo then gets into an argument, ending with Sterling telling Walter that he doesn't know what it is like to lose someone. Later that night, they arrive in Venice. Walter is confronted by the Htuv, who are unaware that Sterling is a pigeon. Marcy reveals to Walter that she knows about Wendy, Walter's mother, who was a police officer who died on duty. Sterling hears this and feels a little guilty for what he had said back on the boat. Meanwhile, Marcy tries to convince him to help turn Sterling in, but Walter refuses. Suddenly, a drone distracts the Htuv, and allows Walter and Sterling to escape. The two discover the drone carrying the Htuv agent database, and Sterling's pigeon friends get a hold of it. At Sterling's command, they start passing the database to one another, trying to prevent the drone from getting it. At the last moment, the database is passed to Sterling, who hasn't quite mastered the use of wings or his beak. He ends up losing possession of the database, which falls off the building and is almost caught by the drone. Fortunately, Walter happened to be riding past at the moment and quickly grabbed the database. However, Killian places his bionic arm in the way, causing Walter to ride right into it, and crash off his motorcycle. After that, Killian reveals himself, takes the database, and prepares to kill Walter. Sterling then calls out to Walter, which distracts Killian's attention for a moment and gives Walter the chance to shower Killian in breadcrumbs, with help from hundreds of pigeons in the surrounding area. Trying to get the breadcrumbs, they distract Killian and flee. Disguised as Sterling once more, Killian escapes the Htuv, shaking Marcy's suspicions of Sterling upon seeing him with a robot hand. Whilst underwater in a submarine, Walter reveals he planted a tracking device on Killian and locates him at the weapons facility. Walter manages to perfect the antidote after finding out that Sterling's supposed to be a female pigeon, since it was his lady pigeon's feather that was initially used to conduct the experiment. And finally, he successfully turns Sterling human again. Meanwhile, Marcy and her team are busy sweeping up evidence of Sterling's movement on his boat. Marcy's team informs her that Sterling was never on the boat, which infuriates her. Director Joy then once again asks Marcy if she's very sure Sterling is behind everything, and the look on Marcy's face doesn't quite give an answer. Reaching Killian's hideout, Sterling is concerned about Walter's safety and sends him away in the submarine after drugging him. Once inside, Sterling takes down the stolen assassin drone and finally confronts Killian, but is knocked out and captured as Killian reveals he has mass-produced hundreds of drones to target everyone at the agency, using the database as revenge for killing his crew in a past mission led by Sterling. Noticing Walter returning in the submarine, Killian starts his revenge with the kid and destroys the submarine, much to Sterling's dismay. But unknown to them, Walter survives with the help of one of his inventions, the inflatable hug. Meanwhile, back at the base, the agents have started to evacuate the place in an orderly manner. And Marcy and her team have nothing on Sterling yet. At Killian's hideout, Walter makes his entrance into the base after Killian had left. After freeing Sterling, he asks what their next plan of action is, but Sterling suggests Walter lead this time. The two